How many times have you judged someone by their appearance, only to swallow your own judgment later? Well, this story is about to make you rethink every sideways glance you've ever given or received. Just imagine, a regular woman, no makeup, no heels, no designer clothes, walks into an upscale restaurant to celebrate her wedding anniversary and is treated like she doesn't belong. What no one expected came moments later. A Porsche pulling up outside, and her husband, a billionaire known in the business world, demanding an explanation. But hold on, this isn't just about a fancy car, it's about subtle prejudice, about the invisible labels we carry without even realizing, and about how a single action can transform an entire environment. What begins as public humiliation turns into one of the most inspiring stories you'll hear today. And the best part? It doesn't teach through force, it teaches through awareness. You're about to understand why some people walk in quietly and leave changing everything around them. Her name was Clara, a serene woman with a gentle smile and eyes that carried more life experience than vanity. On that special night, she chose a simple dress filled with memories, not labels. She arrived early, waiting for her husband, just as they'd planned. But it quickly became clear that her presence was unwelcome. Sideways glances came from every corner, from customers, waiters, and especially the hostess, who didn't even show her to the reserved table. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" the receptionist asked, half smiling. Clara, calm, replied with the grace only a light-hearted soul can offer. "Yes, we have a reservation for two. It's under Arthur Mendes." The hostess raised an eyebrow, typed something on her tablet, took longer than necessary, made sure to show doubt, then said almost as a warning, "It's just that this is a very exclusive restaurant. Usually our clients are different." The phrase hung in the air like a silent slap. Clara felt it, but she didn't respond. She took a deep breath and agreed to sit in the waiting area. No water, no menu, no dignity. Minutes dragged on. The room was full of well-dressed people, expensive perfumes, and forced laughter. But it was also full of blindness, the kind that doesn't see past the surface, that ignores the real stories carried in everyone's life baggage. Then, the sound of a powerful engine shattered the atmosphere. A sleek black Porsche pulled up right at the door. Out stepped Arthur, tall, elegant, internationally renowned for leading one of the largest clean energy companies in the world. He rushed in, eyes searching, until he spotted Clara, sitting alone and ignored. "What happened?" he asked, looking at the staff. Silence. The hostess tried to explain. "Oh, sir, there was a misunderstanding. Your wife arrived earlier and—" But he had already understood. The tone, the body language, the lack of service. And right there, in front of everyone, he did what few would have the courage to do. "I want everyone here to know. This simple woman you ignored is the reason I built everything I have. She's been my partner for over 20 years. When I had nothing, she believed in me. If she's not welcome here, then neither am I." The silence was now filled with collective regret, but it was too late. Arthur took Clara's hand, and they left together, heads held high, leaving behind a room full of people who for the first time that night truly felt small. This is one of those stories that stays with you, not because of luxury, not because of fame, but because it confronts us with what we often pretend not to see. How much we still judge based on appearances, how social prejudice hides behind target audience, dress code, brand image, and how, even unintentionally, we can become accomplices to subtle injustices. But the most beautiful part of this story isn't what was said, it's what was taught, without yelling, without scandal, without revenge. In the days that followed, that restaurant lost more than just customers. It lost respect. The situation went viral. Many recognized the couple. Others didn't, but they recognized the pain Clara went through. Arthur's company received thousands of supportive messages, and days later, Clara wrote a powerful message on her social media, ending with a phrase that became a motto: "It's not the heels that lift you, it's your character." Since then, she's been giving talks about dignity, silent discrimination, and self-worth. She's inspired other women, sparked debates, founded a nonprofit to train vulnerable people for the job market. And it all began because someone judged her before hearing her story. Now be honest, how many times have you caught yourself judging someone just by what you saw on the outside? How many amazing stories might have gone unnoticed because we chose to look with haste or with prejudice? Maybe you've never kicked someone out of a restaurant, but have you, even unintentionally, ignored a talent, underestimated an idea, or treated someone as invisible just because of their appearance? It's time to change that. Don't wait for a Porsche moment to realize someone's true worth. The change starts now, in your next conversation, next interaction, next glance. And if this message hit you differently, then share it with someone who might also need to rethink a few attitudes, because that's how transformation spreads, one story at a time. Oh, and if you want to keep reflecting, growing, and learning with content that truly makes a difference in your life, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because every week there are new stories that open your eyes, touch your heart, and strengthen what really matters. On that elegant evening, Clara walked into the restaurant with shining eyes. She dressed simply, no labels, no heavy makeup, no jewelry, but her smile carried the lightness of someone who knows how to love. And that's exactly why she chose that place, to celebrate another year with the man who changed her life. But before she could even say good evening, she was ignored like someone lost in a dusty shop window. The waiters, hurried and indifferent, looked away as if she didn't belong. This type of situation isn't a soap opera script or social media exaggeration. It's the accurate portrait of many stories that repeat every day. When prejudice disguises itself as protocol, it becomes even crueler. And the most ironic part is that in places meant to overflow with hospitality, judgment often shows up before the welcome. Clara didn't want luxury. She wanted respect. And that, my friend, is the bare minimum any human deserves when they walk into a restaurant, a store, or a business. Now tell me, how many times have you seen someone being treated with disdain just because they didn't look rich? Worse, have you ever, even without realizing, treated someone like that yourself? It's uncomfortable to think about, I know. But it's these reflections that shape our emotional maturity. Because those who see only the outfit rarely understand the value of the stories people carry. And look, Clara's story still had a lot to teach, and the next chapter was closer than anyone imagined. When Clara gently tried to explain she had a reservation, the answer came cold, like silverware on an ice tray. You must be mistaken. This kind of experience isn't available to just anyone. It was as if her presence offended the room's aesthetic. Around her, discreet chuckles, judgmental glances, and that deafening silence of those who judge without speaking a word. She didn't even get the chance to pull up her email confirmation. She was politely invited to leave. What's most curious, or infuriating, is that no one questioned the reasoning behind that treatment. And the restaurant wasn't even full. There was time, space, and more than enough kindness if they had wanted to use it. But they didn't. They chose the shallow logic of appearance. And that, my friend, is a social trap that brings down many good people. Snap judgments are like dirty mirrors. They distort the reflection and erase the stories that make someone worthy of respect. Clara walked out with the dignity of someone who's been through worse, but with the hurt of someone who only wanted a moment of love and celebration. And let's be clear, when public humiliation happens, the damage runs deeper. It wounds the present and reopens scars from the past. Fortunately, Clara wasn't the type to give up. And just when the room seemed drowned in contempt, something unexpected happened outside, right at the glass door still reflecting her disbelieved image. While Clara was still trying to understand what hurt more, the waiter's looks or the hidden smiles of the customers, a powerful engine roared at the entrance. It was a Porsche 911 Turbo, the kind that makes every head turn. The car parked precisely at the restaurant's front, and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, walking confidently, eyes scanning the room. It was Richard Thompson, Clara's husband, and at that moment, everything began to change. The staff who had ignored Clara now rushed like ants discovering a drop of sugar. With a calm but firm voice, Richard asked, "Where is my wife? We made a reservation for today. Tasting menu, window table. Why hasn't she been served yet?" Faces around them turned pale. It only took his surnames and the car for the realization to hit. But the most valuable thing there wasn't the car. It was what it represented. The respect Clara had deserved all along, and that only appeared when prejudice was confronted. And here comes the most painful part of so many stories like this. Recognition only came with the presence of a status symbol. It wasn't Clara's words. It wasn't the proof on her phone. It was the car, the suit, the male figure, the owner of the money. That says a lot about the world we live in, and also about how much we still need to learn. But hold on. Richard wasn't there just to fix things. He had a plan. Not for revenge, but for education. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. With the demeanor of someone used to calmly negotiating billions, he opened his phone and showed the reservation, the prepayment, and the name of the person who had confirmed it all over the phone. It's all here. You received it, accepted it, and charged it. You just forgot to treat my wife with dignity. With each sentence, the silence in the dining room grew heavier. The manager, once confident, now searched for excuses in the carpet's corners. It's curious how, in moments like these, shame changes address. At first, Clara was the unwelcome guest. Now everyone scrambled to justify the unjustifiable. And maybe that's exactly what makes these stories so painful. Prejudice doesn't come from lack of information. It comes from choice, choosing to ignore someone because they don't fit a mold, choosing to disrespect without asking, without listening, without truly seeing. And when the truth is exposed, no uniform can hide the discomfort. What impressed most was Richard's tone. He didn't humiliate, didn't expose, didn't ridicule anyone. He chose firmness with empathy. And here's where many people get it wrong. Being educated is not being passive. It's emotional intelligence. And when used wisely, it has the power to transform entire environments. And if you thought the impact of that scene ended there, think again. Because someone inside that room was about to break the silence and bring a new layer to this story. In the corner of the room, nearly hidden behind the counter, a young waitress wrung her hands, nervous. She had witnessed everything from the beginning, heard the whispers, noticed Clara's discomfort, and still chose not to interfere. But now, with the truth revealed, she felt she could no longer stay silent. She approached with a mix of courage and remorse and whispered, "I tried to say there was a reservation, but no one listened." That quiet, timid statement spoke volumes. It showed that, often, prejudice doesn't survive just through direct action, but through omission. How many stories of injustice continue because the right people choose to stay silent? Because those who could act turn their eyes away? It's easy to point out the mistakes of those who judge, but it's much harder to face the mirror of those who watch and do nothing. And maybe you, reading this now, have also stayed silent before some injustice, thinking it wasn't your place. But true growth begins when we understand that taking a stand is a choice and a responsibility. That young waitress didn't change the course of the story at that moment, but she took the first step toward not repeating the mistake. And that's what separates those who follow the current from those who want to change it. And little did she know that Clara, the woman everyone had underestimated, was an expert in something that would forever change that environment. Sensing the heavy air and the shameful faces around her, Clara took a deep breath and smiled gently. It wasn't a superior smile, but one that carried a deeper truth. She looked at the manager and said, with the serenity of someone who owns her pain, "Instead of suing you, I propose something else. I want to gather all the staff for a conversation. Not about what happened to me, but about what can stop happening to others." And so began the plan. Not of revenge, but of transformation. Richard immediately supported the idea. And the restaurant, not quite knowing what it was stepping into, agreed. The next day, the team was called for an internal meeting. Clara didn't come with slides or a teacher's tone. She sat on a chair, looked everyone in the eye, and said, "Today, I'm not a customer or a psychologist. I'm just a woman with stories of judgment that could have been avoided." That introduction disarmed everyone. After all, when pain comes without accusation, it hits deeper. Here's the key point. Transforming environments starts by transforming minds. Clara knew that. It wasn't the first time she had seen ignorance disguised as common sense. And as a specialist in corporate emotional education, she had the tools and words that not only moved people, they changed them. Instead of punishing, she taught. And as each staff member absorbed her truth, no one expected what was coming next, something that would move them even more. Clara didn't limit herself to recounting the restaurant episode. She brought up other stories from her life, moments where she was underestimated for being a woman, for being black, for dressing simply. She told about a time she was ignored at a business meeting until they found out she was the mediator, and another when she was mistaken for a secretary while arriving to give a keynote lecture at a university. The employees, once stiff and formal, now listened with teary eyes. Clara's language wasn't technical, but emotional. She spoke of pain with humanity and of learning with humor. She explained how prejudice can be taught without words, transmitted through gestures, glances, and habits we never questioned, and more. She showed how to break this cycle, with empathy, active listening, and the courage to review one's own behavior. Some employees whispered among themselves, "Why has no one ever talked to us like this before?" And that's the magic of knowledge shared from the heart. It doesn't humiliate, it enlightens. Clara didn't just want to change the culture of that restaurant. She wanted to inspire a new way of seeing the world. Because when you understand that everyone carries their stories, you start seeing fewer labels and more essence. And that's when the impact began to go beyond the restaurant's walls and reach the owner of the chain. When the owner heard about what had happened, and especially about how Clara handled it all, he decided to do something unprecedented. He invited her to lead a new emotional training program across all the restaurants in the group. The idea was simple but powerful: turn service into a reflection of empathy. And not just with formal classes, but with monthly gatherings, conversation circles, and real testimonials focused on the stories that everyone carries, customers and staff alike. The first team already showed results. The once rushed waiters now made eye contact. The reception became genuinely kind, not just mechanically polite. People stopped serving customers and started welcoming human beings. Clara knew that cultural change doesn't happen overnight, but she also knew that when change starts from within, no resistance can stop it. And it even inspired those who thought they already knew everything about customer service. This kind of transformation only happens when someone dares to act differently. And that's when stories gain value beyond entertainment. They become tools of awareness. Clara didn't need to shout, sue, or seek revenge. She used what was most valuable: her journey. And it was that journey that awakened a desire in the manager, one he didn't even know he had. After weeks of closely following the training and watching the team's transformation, the manager, the same one who had asked Clara to leave, asked to speak. In front of everyone, he took off his name tag, placed it on the table and said, "Today I realized that my biggest mistake wasn't what I did that day. It was everything I failed to see all those other times." The room fell silent. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't performative. It was real remorse, the kind that comes from within and changes how we live. He apologized. And it wasn't just words. It was followed by action. He committed to rethinking his leadership, changing how he managed the team, and made an unexpected invitation. He asked Clara to become a permanent consultant for the network, helping not only that restaurant, but all others to grow in empathy, respect, and emotional intelligence. And here lies the beauty of it all. Even the harshest mistakes can become doors to growth, if faced with humility. And that's how the woman who was cast out because of her appearance came back through competence, example, and wisdom. Stories like this are not just lessons, they're mirrors. Mirrors that show us how much we still have to learn about seeing others. But wait, there was still one last detail. Because despite everything, Clara hadn't yet said the sentence that would summarize the entire journey, and she was about to say it, right there, in front of everyone. With everyone gathered around, Clara calmly looked at the manager, at the waiters, at the young waitress who had once tried to warn them, and smiled. There was an energy of transformation in the air, the kind you can feel even if you can't explain. And then, with the same grace of someone serving a well-prepared dish, she said, "A person's elegance is never in their clothes, but in how they treat others." The sentence dropped like a collective realization. Simple, deep, unforgettable. Some lowered their eyes, others nodded. It was as if that sentence summed up not just the night, but years of learning swept under the rug by empty formalities. And that's what makes certain stories so powerful. They disarm us. They force us to reflect without pointing fingers, and they make us realize that true luxury is being decent, especially when no one is watching. And if you think this was just another feel-good anecdote with a happy ending, think again. Because from that day on, a lot changed. There and in other locations too. But most importantly, in how those people began to see whoever walked through that door. Clara went on with her life, but she left a legacy. A daily reminder that every human being carries their own stories, and that the least we owe them is respect. The transformation, in fact, was only just beginning. And now, tell me honestly, how many times have you caught yourself judging someone just by what you saw on the outside? Maybe without realizing it, maybe without any bad intent, maybe even thinking you were right. But the truth is, how many stories have gone unnoticed because we chose to look quickly, or with prejudice? The truth is, appearance has always been a treacherous trap. It deceives, distorts, and limits. And if we're not careful, we end up using our eyes like a warped lens that blurs what truly matters. And then, talent goes unseen, bravery slips by unnoticed, and chances to connect, learn, and grow are simply lost. Maybe you've never kicked anyone out of a restaurant. That's fine. But have you ever laughed at someone for not dressing appropriately? Have you ever looked down on someone who seemed out of place? Or worse, Have you ever dismissed a brilliant idea just because it came from someone who didn't fit the profile? These are uncomfortable questions, and that's exactly why they matter so much. Because there are people carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, and no one notices. People who fight silent battles every single day. People who smile on the outside while bleeding on the inside. And when you judge, you close doors. When you underestimate, you contribute to a world that's colder, blinder, and more unfair. But here's the good news. That mindset can, and should, be changed. You don't need to wait for a Porsche to pull up outside to start seeing people's worth. You don't need to find out that the woman you ignored was actually the co-owner of a multi-million-dollar company. Or that the modest man in the bank line used to be a PhD professor. Or that the young man you dismissed in a job interview was a genius just waiting for a chance. You don't need to live one of these plot twist stories to learn from them. You just need to be willing to open your eyes. Transformation begins in the next meeting, the next service, the next conversation. It starts when you choose to listen with more patience, observe with more empathy, ask with more interest. We live in a world that praises packaging, but if you want to truly live, you need to start valuing what's inside. Some stories may seem small, but they carry entire revolutions within them, and those are the ones that truly matter. Like the cleaning lady who was once treated with contempt, but years later returned as the owner of the building. Or the boy who was mocked at school, but grew up to become a leading expert in the very field they said he'd never master. Or the woman who walked into a store dressed simply, got ignored, and bought the entire company the next day. These aren't just feel-good anecdotes. They're mirrors, and if you look closely, you might see a part of yourself in them. Or at the very least, realize how much you still have to grow. Because deep down, we all have something to unlearn. Prejudices disguised as intuition. Lack of listening dressed up as objectivity, arrogance wrapped in experience. And when we allow ourselves to reflect, we realize we can and must do better. So if this message touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who also needs to rethink a few things, who might also be ignoring valuable stories right in front of them. Because that's how transformation spreads, from the inside out, from one look to another, from one conversation to the next, from one story to another. And listen, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that no one grows alone. We grow together. We grow when we allow ourselves to listen, to feel, and most of all, to change. So if this reflection stirred something inside you, hold on to it. Because this is the perfect moment to begin. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stick with us. Every week you'll find stories here that don't just inspire, they challenge. That don't just move, they teach. That don't just talk about others, they speak about me, about you, about all of us. Because the best stories are the ones that change the way we see things, and with that, change the world. So, are you ready to see the invisible?